Alright, so in this part of the class, we're going to completely switch gears effectively and start talking about something called classes and another thing that is related, which are objects. Okay? So before we really get into that, I want to ask you a question. I want you to think about how we can represent a 2D point in Java. Okay, so just some Cartesian points like 3 comma 4, negative 2 comma negative 8, 0 0, any 2D point in like over a Cartesian plane of integers. Okay, so how can we represent that in Java? Well, one way, which is probably the most intuitive, is just declaring two variables, int x and int y. Okay, and then just assign those, like for example, we could do x equals 3 and y equals 4. But then the problem is, what if we want to represent multiple points? Well, then you might think, okay, let's use an array, right? We can use an array, and well, actually, let me back up. So we could also, like, the big issue with this, at least, is that we've separated the fact that x and y are related, right? So only we as the programmer know that x and y are related. No one else does. So one thing we could do is put the values into an array. So like we could do 3 comma 4, and then this would couple the fact that 3 and 4 are together, like they're related together because they're in an array. Okay? But now the issue is any method that receives an array of integers now can work over this point. And, sometimes methods that don't operate over the assumption of there being two values, they don't make sense in the context of a point. Like, for example, we could have an array called, or a method called find max, and that receives a point, it receives an array of any number of values. But the problem is that we can pass this point representation into this array. Okay? And that's not good, because this means that there's now this association with something that should not be associated with an array. And what I mean by that is that we've coupled the fact that we're trying to represent a point with something that can represent any kind of grouped integers. Okay? So we're using something that is too powerful, so to speak. Okay? So what's the solution? The solution is to create something called a class. Okay? So a class is nothing more than a blueprint for an object. Okay? And an object, and you're going to see that these definitions are mutually referential, is that an object is an instance, that's not how you spell instance, of a class. Okay? So, yeah, these definitions are mutually referential, but that's fine, we can work with that. Okay? So what do I mean? Well, we want to have some structure that represents a point. Okay? So, but let's back up for a second. Where have we seen classes before? Well, we've been seeing them this entire time that we've been programming, right? Classes until this point, no pun intended, have been used solely for storing static methods. Okay? And remember that we said that we don't care about what the word static means. In this unit, we'll finally explain what static means and what it implies. Okay? So, but like I said, we would just write methods like static, int, sum, give it some parameters, and then do something with those parameters. Okay? I have a Java doc, We test it, all that good stuff. Okay? But that really, 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 really undersells the potential behind classes and what classes are good for. Okay? So classes are extremely important. They are fundamental to Java. They are fundamental to this notion of something that is called object-oriented programming. Okay? So everything in Java, everything that is not a primitive. So I've said this before, right? Anything that is not a primitive, i.e. that is a reference type, is an object. Okay? And that's just how Java is, right? That's just the notion that in Java everything is an object, and this is where that comes from. So everything that is not a primitive, and we've seen lots of objects so far. We've seen array lists, linked lists, stacks, queues, strings, priority queues, comparators, streams, int stream, optional. We've seen plenty of objects so far. We just haven't really said anything about their significance. Okay?